Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a lot to discuss. First things first, I want to thank all the new subscribers, all the new people joining us. I really do appreciate it. For anybody interested in the Alabama football content, go ahead and subscribe. Obviously, Alabama basketball season is just under 2 weeks away before the scrimmages start. I'm really excited to get into that. We have a lot of news upcoming, so of course we will do breakdowns of all the games. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. As always, if you hear any ads or on Apple or Spotify, anything you could do to help out the sponsors, we would appreciate. But before I get into the show, for those of you that may follow me over on Twitter, y'all may have seen that I announced something earlier today, actually, and that is that I got engaged yesterday. So, that was part of the reason why I'd said, oh, I'm going to be recording a little bit differently this week. Usually I try to record on Sunday afternoons, but Sunday after church this week, we have a little bit of an engagement party at my parents' house. So that's what I have going on. So, kind of a little bit of a life update for myself. One other little bit of programming note. We do have the guys from the Unwritten Rule, a Missouri podcast, a part of the Believe podcast network with myself. They're going to be joining this show. I plan to try to put the episode out around the same time that we normally do. Got to work out some schedules with them, but I do plan to record with them here this week. So going to have a little bit of an opposing fans perspective for what I think will be a very good game in Columbia upcoming. But we've got a Vandy game to discuss, so let's get right into it. Alabama wins by a score of 30-14. This game, honestly, was a very good game. And the score indicates, it's kind of weird. The score both doesn't accurately indicate how close the game was and perfectly accurately indicates how close the game was. Obviously, a lot of people are going to point to the final score because of Alabama getting a fourth down run and running it in for the touchdown at the very end of this game. The reason that one's very important is it caused Alabama to cover. I'm sure a lot of people who bet on this is that was a very important score to some. However, the reason why I look at it as, even though, the game was really a 9-point game until that final score, kind of backdoor cover at the very end, the reason why I would still consider it kind of a decent culmination of how the game was played is Alabama actually, and I tweeted this out, that Alabama's offense was the reason why Alabama did not blow them out or have a better win than it appeared. And that was because when you looked at how Alabama performed in the red zone, they really weren't that great. Alabama ends up kicking 3 field goals in this game. They missed another. Ty Simpson throws an interception, down in the red zone as well. His first interception of the year, or just before you get to the red zone. And so it was a situation where, when Alabama got around that 30-yard line or so, call it, just under 50-yard field goal, Alabama's offense was stalling out quite a bit this game. And obviously that happens sometimes, but it really felt like at times Ryan Grubb was trying to do a little too much calling plays. I said it in one of my groups that it really felt like he was trying to get fancy with it when the meat and potatoes was working, right? The meat and potatoes in this game was Jam Miller on the ground. He had 22 carries for 136 yards and a touchdown, and it really felt like Alabama was able to run the ball very effectively in this game. They averaged 3.8 a carry. And consistently, if you can average 4 yards a carry, that's a first down in 3 carries, right? Like, that is a recipe for success. You'd like to see a couple extra explosives, but, if you're averaging 4 yards a carry, you're averaging 4 yards a carry. I was very excited to see that. This was by far Alabama's best game running the football. I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive line. I think a lot of that had to do with Jam Miller. I think that all things come together, and that made for a really good running attack that Alabama had in this game. Additionally, with Ty Simpson, it really felt like, again, those plays that we're specifically pointing to, it really felt like there was a couple of things that Ryan Grubb tried to do that were a little too cute, but then there also were a couple of moments where Ty Simpson did acknowledge this, that he held on the football too long. He took 4 sacks in this game, and at least a couple of those sacks, it felt like Ty was just trying to do too much with the football. and could have thrown the ball away to save the sack yardage. Obviously, you don't love to see that. You really appreciate the heart that Ty's showing out there. He's leaving it all on the field, and like that exact heart is what gets you a touchdown. And the way that Ty Simpson's able to roll out and flip his hips and get a perfect throw to, all the different ways that he was able. It's the good with the bad, right? The Isaiah Horton, where Alabama at the very end of this, or near the end of this game, Alabama's rolling out and about to go out of bounds, and Ty Simpson, is able to get a pass over to Isaiah Horton when it looks like it's going to be a loss of yardage, but he gets the first down instead, right? Like, Ty clearly showed a lot of fight, and there's a lot of really, really good things you're going to like to see about it. The interception, we'll mention it here. I was not as much of concern as I think some fans were. I didn't hate the aggressive play calling nature of Ryan Grubb saying, "Oh, they think that we're going to run it on 4th and 1. Let's do the play action and see if we can hit them for a big one." I don't hate that. It was a really good play by the defensive back. Obviously, could have been a better throw by Ty, but in general, don't overall hate it. Think that he maybe potentially just didn't see the guy, misread it a little bit. But again, all in all, I was not as upset about that play call as I think a lot of people were. I think when you're judging a play like that, I like to look at it from a standpoint of, I don't want hindsight and what actually happened on the play to determine if the play was a bad call, right? In my mind, it's either a good call or it's a bad call. And even if it's a good call, it could have a bad result. And so that's kind of how I look at it as best I can. Obviously, sometimes, that's hindsight, being able to look at it after a win. Maybe if we lose, that I think completely differently about that. But personally, that's kind of how I look at it. But I think the big key to this game was Alabama was able to control the line of scrimmage, and Alabama was able to do what Vandy was able to do last season. And I think that there were a lot of factors to that. I think a lot of that had to do with what Alabama's offense was last season. We were not able to run the football super effectively on the ground. We also were behind for a huge percentage of the game, so you just couldn't run the ball on the ground. It was kind of forcing your hands. It was like one thing led to another, which led to you playing from behind, which led to you throwing the football, which led to worse time of possession. Versus in this game, even though you got behind, 7-0 because of a long busted run, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But even though that happened, Alabama was still able to run the football and control the line of scrimmage, and Alabama almost doubled them up from a time of possession standpoint. Alabama finishes this game with over 37 minutes time of possession, whereas Vandy has just over 22. That's a big deal, right? And it really showed later in the game, the running the football continued to be successful. And again, that's something you saw with Nick Saban. The runs in the first quarter and the second quarter set up the runs in the third and the fourth because you're leaning on the defense. They've been on the field for a long time. And again, that's what was happening to Alabama year one against Vandy, or game one against Vandy last season. They talked about on the broadcast about how Alabama was playing a lot of man coverage, and last season kind of changed us into much more of a zone fit team. And if you, or like a ton of people who are on Twitter or just screaming at your TV during this game early on, the 14 points Vandy scored, and especially the first quarter, was awful for Alabama. The first quarter could not have gone worse from an Alabama defensive perspective, and it really felt like, oh snap, here we go again. Right? That's really what it felt like. It felt like Diego Pavia and Alexander, the running back, had kind of called their shot, and they were going to do exactly what they said they were going to do. They had been running their mouth all off season, and they were just going to do exactly what they said they were going to do. And that's what it felt like. And then Alabama flipped a switch. I mean, simply put, there's no other way to say it. Alabama flipped a switch. And the big switch that was flipped really felt like they were just getting run fits better. This Vanderbilt team finishes with 19 runs for 135 yards. What I want y'all to consider when you're thinking about that runs, one of those runs was for 65 yards. So that obviously is going to skew the numbers a little bit. Additionally, something you have to consider in this game is, and I want to pull up the exact stat of the first half versus second half numbers, first quarter versus the rest of the game numbers. But it just was a standpoint where Alabama, again, looked like they were getting gashed on the ground over and over and over again. It happened. Diego Pavia had a big run. Their running back had a big run. And then all of a sudden, it really felt like Kane Womack was able to get the defensive backs and get the linebackers and everyone on the same page from a run fit perspective. And then Alabama's run defense for the rest of the game was phenomenal. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. It was phenomenal. So the stat was that Alabama gave up 113 rushing yards in the first quarter of this game. That's obviously atrocious. You cannot give up that amount. The rest of the game, they gave up 22 rushing yards, including 9 in the second half. Right? That this is a standpoint where now obviously Vandy also went away from the run, so that also, but because Alabama was so successful stopping it, Vandy went away from it, and it was kind of one thing led to another with that. And again, they had a run of 65 yards and 36 yards. That's 101 yards worth of runs. The other 17 runs, they had 34 yards. Right, so they averaged 2 yards a carry outside of their 2 explosives. Obviously, the explosives is something you don't want to give up. I'm sure Kane Womack will talk about it in the press conferences this week. But they gave up 2 explosives in the running game, and then they gave up and that's really was the difference from that standpoint. But what the defense was able to do, it really felt like they were able to get better pressure on Diego Pavia. I really liked what I saw out of Yanze Pierre in this game. I really liked what I saw out of Justin Jefferson in this game. This is by far Justin Jefferson's best played game that I think he's had in an Alabama uniform. He had 14 total tackles, including 9 solo tackles. Like, he was everywhere. And again, it was everyone. It was not just your linebackers or your defensive backs or line. It was a combination of everyone in that first quarter. But I was very, very, very happy to see the success that I saw out of Justin Jefferson and what those guys were able to do. Also, I think you have to give huge credit to Keon Sabb for his interception. I thought that was a great, to jump that route and be able to get on that. I thought that was a huge one. Also, I believe it was I believe it was Justin Jefferson also that was able to rip out the ball from Diego Pavia, which Alabama was able to recover a fumble. And I really feel like that fumble was the turning point in this game. Right, that fumble started to put a little bit of a crack in the armor of Diego Pavia, and from then moving forward, Alabama was able to have a ton of success. Again, I still think that the Alabama offense would like to have seen better things inside that 35-yard line because they definitely struggled a little bit when they got to the 30, 35-yard line and definitely inside the red zone as to why you saw as many kicks. Obviously, one of them missed, but even the ones that were made, the reason you kicked so many is you just struggled a little bit in that, 15 to 35-yard line of Vanderbilt. So would love to see that be a little better, but I thought that overall Alabama definitely controlled this game and played very well. So wanted to start this one with a huge shout out to the defense because I think that, just like many others, were quick to criticize the defense because of what we saw last season and what it felt like. You mean y'all are giving up the shovel passes, y'all are giving up the runs. Like the same thing that happened last season at the start of this game, you were giving it up. And then Alabama, again, the defense just flipped a switch. And by flipping that switch, that allowed the defense to be able to get off the field on third downs. That allowed the offense to kind of get the ball back and have some momentum moving. Alabama obviously ties it up at the end of the first half. I thought that was a methodical, perfect drive by Ty Simpson. And before we get into that drive, there's one thing, and I mentioned it to the guys we were tailgating with. Me and my girlfriend went down to my fiance, I guess, went down to the quad, and we're tailgating with some friends of ours. And something I mentioned to kind of the group was I was so impressed by Kalen DeBoer's time management going into that last drive at the end of the second quarter. I don't think it's going to be talked about enough because at the end of the day, you won the game, and I don't think those timeouts that he took are going to be talked about. But I thought that Kalen DeBoer calling the timeouts when he called them, which allowed Alabama to be able to have the ball back with time left. Vanderbilt we called timeout. Vanderbilt ends up scoring on the shovel pass. It allows Alabama to get the ball back with time to score, and Ty Simpson, Jeremy Bernard, and the whole offensive staff or offensive, unit was able to march down the field and score a touchdown. And it was a phenomenal throw, catch, route by Jeremy, to actually get the touchdown. But, everything leading up to that point, I was very, very, very impressed by what I saw. And I think that really was like a linchpin key of the game that isn't going to be talked about. There's timeout usage, but I thought that it was phenomenal. I thought that Kalen DeBoer did exactly what you're supposed to do as a head coach. Then when we talk about the rest of the offense, I thought that Ty Simpson again. I again didn't love the throw. Didn't hate the play call, but didn't love the throw that led to the interception. Outside of that, Ty was absolutely bang on perfect. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. I think that Ty Simpson, the only criticism that you could have about Ty Simpson in this game is that he held on the football too long on those 4 sacks, right? He was trying to do a little too much. There were a couple ones like he took a 10-yard sack and he could have just thrown the ball away. And that was just Ty trying to will his team to victory. And if that's what happens, like, that's okay, right? He wasn't putting the ball in harm's way. On those other ones, it really was just he was doing a little too much with the football and trying to do too much. But Ty Simpson goes 23 of 31 for 340 yards, averaging 11 yards of completion, 2 touchdowns. Really, really good quarterback. I mean, he is jumping up everyone's NFL draft boards. Honestly, Ty Simpson is being the guy that I talked about in the offseason. When people asked me what is kind of the future at quarterback for Alabama, I had said Ty Simpson is the quarterback this season. And if he plays the potential that I thought he was capable of, the decision on quarterback is not this season, it's next. Because Ty Simpson was going to go to the NFL draft and be a first-round draft pick. And then your discussion was Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, both phenomenal talents that have incredible arms, and that was going to be your quarterback competition going into next season. But the quarterback competition this season was not as much of one as people anticipated. And it really seems that that's the case, right? Like, it really seems that Ty Simpson is an absolutely outstanding quarterback that is played to his absolute utmost potential, is doing what he wants to do with the football. At times, again, needs to remember to throw the ball away. And again, I will give Ty credit. He mentioned that in his post-game press conference when he was meeting with the media. So I would be, I'm glad he acknowledged it, but I don't think too much more needs to be said about it. I'm sure they'll go through it in film, and there may be comments said in the press conferences on Monday. But in my mind, I just thought that Ty Simpson played a really, really good game and should be commended for it. Again, Kevin Riley and Jam Miller were phenomenal. Jam Miller was definitely the feature back in this one. 22 yards. 22 carries for 136 yards and a touchdown. Was really, really happy with what we saw out of Jam Miller. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we had a 366-pound running back in Caden Proctor getting the handoff for a first down. Really like them getting Caden involved. I think that the wrinkles that you can involve him with is a big deal, because I think eventually that's going to open up a bigger trick play. Ryan Williams, I thought that he played a better game in this one. He did have one drop that wasn't ideal, but he played much better. It seemed like he was more locked in on this one. He did catch the touchdown. He was really good in the scramble drill on that specific touchdown. I thought that Ladzier Brooks was phenomenal in scramble drill. I thought that Josh Cuevas showed some athleticism that I did not expect to see out of him with the hurdle. I thought that in general our receiving core did what you would expect our receiving core to do. The only thing that I was hoping for was a deep shot that I didn't really see us take in this game. But I think that Vanderbilt was kind of sitting back and waiting on one of those kind of all games. So I think that's part of the reason why we didn't end up taking one. But that's the one kind of knock I would say on the offense is obviously their execution within the 15 to 35-yard line like we talked about previously. And then the lack of deep shot. Like I said, I personally would have liked to have seen one. I thought that our receivers were just better than their corners, especially with them having some guys out. I thought that that was a spot that we were going to have a ton of success in this game. And Ty did end up having a ton of success in this game, picking on those guys, absolutely. But I do think that there was potentially, some points left on the table by some potential, shot calls that we just didn't dial up. So that's kind of my thoughts on this one. Again, I thought it's a huge win for Alabama obviously awesome to be able to cover this one, but was very, very excited to see the win, able to shut up Vanderbilt because, don't love to see Vanderbilt and everyone talking smack coming into Bryant-Denny Stadium. Happy to put it where it's supposed to be. This game, I will go ahead and give you all a forewarning, and I know I have the Mizzou guys coming on. This game next week kind of scares me. 11 a.m. on the road, a good Missouri team coming out of a bye. This one scares me. So we will talk about it with the Missouri guys. I'm very curious to see what they have to say. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it. I know this one's a little bit shorter, but I really do appreciate all the support. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.